Right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the executive meeting on the 18th of November 2025. For those in the chamber, apologies for the slight humming noise. There's a trapped bee. Well, I think it's something to do with the volume of the microphones, but we'll just have to get through it tonight, and it'll be sorted out. Anyway, yeah. So welcome everyone, and welcome everyone online. Item 1 is apologies for absence.
And there are no apologies tonight.
Thank you. Secondly, item 2, leaders' announcements. Obviously, we're online, so please remember to use microphones when you speak. Item 3, minutes of the 7th of October 2025. So we have the minutes from that meeting. Are you happy that I sign, or are there any comments or questions? Fine.
Thank you, Lisa. I propose that we accept these minutes.
Thank you very much. Any seconder? Thanks, Chris. Thank you very much. And can we have a vote? All those in favour, please? Thank you very much. That's all. Anyone against or abstaining? No, that's carried. Thank you. Any declarations of interest, item 4? No? Okay. And right, we'll move on to item 5, which is local government reorganisation in Hertfordshire, submission of final proposals. And this is on pages 21 to 479 of the agenda pack, which obviously we've all read. All 479 pages. Well, I think actually in this case we probably all have. As we know, in February, the government invited all councils in Hertfordshire to develop proposals for a single tier of local government for the county of Hertfordshire to replace both county and the districts and boroughs with new unitary councils. Since February, all of the 11 councils and the Police and Crime Commissioner have worked together to develop 3 separate unitary options for Hertfordshire: a 2, a 3, and a 4 unitary model. And as you know, we held an extraordinary council meeting on the 13th of November, where members were able to discuss the pros and cons of these models. In an indicative vote that evening, we saw 3 councillors vote for the 2 unitary, 10 for the 3 model, 15 for the 4 unitary, with a significant number, 14, who abstained. As I say, that was a purely indicative vote, and as our Chief Legal Officer explained at our full council on the 22nd of October and again on the 13th of November, the final decision on which of which three options East Herts Council chooses as a preference in the submission to government lies with the executive, and that's why we're going to discuss this item tonight. I think I should remind everyone here again tonight that all we can do as an executive is express our preference for one of those 3 unitary options. That preference will be recorded in the submission that goes to the government by the 28th of November, and it's the government that makes the final decision. We expect to hear about that decision hopefully by July next year. So I think with that, I'm happy to propose this report. Could I have a seconder, please?
Yes, thank you, Lisa. I'm happy to second this proposal.
Thank you very much. Okay, comments and thoughts, questions? Over to you, Alex.
So I wanted to point out it took 7 years to carry out the last reorganisation of local government. Local governments have been forced to make the switch to the unitary model by central government this time round in little more than 2 years. I have no problem with the concept being put forward of fewer layers of government. I think residents will appreciate this and find it less confusing. I have noticed in Europe, where local government is more devolved than in the UK, that the quality of the civic space is often better than in the UK. I wish I could believe that the Labour government genuinely wants us to devolve democracy. However, I fear that this reorganisation proposal is more a case of after 40% cuts to local government as a result of the Conservative government's austerity agenda, that there is not enough money available to put into local government. Moreover, I'm disappointed that I'm not seeing any proposals to one of the biggest issues faced by successive national governments, and that's the huge cost of dealing with the increasing percentage of older people in the population and their need for social care. This local government reorganisation is a huge tourniquet solution that comes with no infusion of blood. Having considered the huge amount of evidence presented by the consultants, commissioned by the County Council, and mindful of weighing up the need for devolution of democracy against the decent start to the new structures financially, I will be voting for 3 unitaries. 3 is the best of a difficult choice. East Herts would suffer particularly badly financially with the lowest population of the 4 if we went for the 4 unitaries, and yet with a high percentage of rural areas, which typically costs more money, and it take longer for that model to break even. As the Hertfordshire population is set to get even bigger with the overspill from London, the 2 unitary model will quickly become an even bigger population, and to my mind is too big in democratic terms. As executive for communities and a representative for residents in East Herts, I'm particularly aware of the fact that we have a strong network of town and parish councils in this district, stronger, I would say, than any other district in Hertfordshire, as many districts have boroughs and don't have town and parish councils to the extent we do. I really hope that whatever model of unitary we end up with, that this existing strong local democratic representation will be respected and strengthened. Personally, I will be observing the development of the new structure going forward in terms of town and parish councils closely, and it will be an important benchmark of success to me that the democratic representation of these bonds hold and increase. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Vicky.
I think I made my views about what I believe to be a complete sham consultation on local government reorganisation at the extraordinary council meeting last week perfectly clear. However, I didn't go into too much detail about my personal thoughts on the options for reorganisation. From my perspective, were this a genuine bottom-up review that was driven by councils to get the best operational models for their area with sufficient implementation time, I would be all in favour of it, because I do think that the current 3-tier system is confusing and fragmented. But this would need to be wide-ranging, allowing councils to consider crossing county borders to exploit area and regional advantages, not merely stick within the lines of existing district and county borders, which, more often than not, were drawn along the lines of conveniently placed rivers, rather than for any strategic, logistic or geographical merit. Also, the government-dictated ideology of needing 500k of population in each area to yield the optimum council size has been thoroughly debunked by research publicised by the District Council Network last month, which shows that the size of council neither saves money nor delivers better services, and the correlation on this actually favours smaller councils. Even the government has admitted that it has no data to support this figure, which is also known as making it up as you go along. The DCN data shows that the tipping point for higher spends per resident is 350k of population. Projected service performance outcomes are better for councils at the 275k median size, and the average Band D council tax for councils over 500k are also higher than average and below average for those with less than 500k population. At the council meeting, I described the choices of unitary as Hobson's choice. But as Democrats, I also think we should honour the choice of the majority. For me, this means I will be voting for the 4 unitary option, as while the current financial projections are against it, we did hear from the Executive Member for Financial Sustainability at the last debate that in the lessons learnt for another council post their move to a unitary, that its financial projections were utter bunkum. Reading the aims of the local government reorganisation set by government, which included aspirations for democratic local representation as well as delivery of good services, doesn't even more supports my preference for a full unitary option. The data from the DCN indicating that a Cirsa 275k median population council outperforms the larger 500k council, coupled with my personal experience of working with a fantastically successful unitary council with only 130k population, also means that I personally think the 4-council model is the optimum for a large rural area like East Herts. So, for me, 4 is the magic number.
Thanks, Vicky. Sarah.
Thank you, Leader, and some good points. So you give even more thought to the situation. I suppose just coming at this from a personal perspective. So, like everyone, you know, I've spent a long time reading the information. I rewatched the council meeting from Thursday just to, yes, mull over all the points. The biggest thing for me, and I know we can't really have a huge amount of faith in these numbers. I appreciate they're the best that we can do based on all the information we have. And at the same time, there's so much unknown, and 10-year projections. I mean, it's hard enough coming up with 1 to 2 year projections, let alone 10-year projections, and have any confidence in them. But seeing as how that is the information we've got in front of us, to me, as a councillor coming in, I've felt the biggest burden has been wanting to achieve things and not being able to because we don't have the money to do those things, and that's felt like that with the swimming pools and like with other opportunities that we could have had, but because the finances haven't been there, it's just not been as viable or as achievable, or things are on a smaller scale than we'd like. And just looking at the 4 unitary model, that feels like putting us in a position based on these figures here, which is all we've got to work on in terms of the data in front of us. As I guess obviously we've read further beyond that as well, but based on these projections, putting us in a position of not really being able to do as much fiscally for at least another 10 years or so. And I listened again to the meeting, and there were a lot of really impassioned arguments about the need for democracy close to us. And at the same time, I kind of feel democracy is only as good as what you can do with it. And if you don't have the rest of the tools that you need, particularly financial, it's not going to be an opportunity to maximise on that. So then off the back of that thinking and looking at what the stakeholders felt, it seems that 2 unitaries makes the most sense. If I'm thinking, okay, well, the fiscal side is the priority followed by democracy, 2 unitaries meant the least amount of disaggregation of services and the most opportunity to make financial sense. And at the same time, 2 unitaries is quite a long way away from what the indicative votes suggested. So in that sense, 3 sort of feels like a compromise, but I'm still torn as to whether it's the compromise for the better or like the best of both worlds, or kind of achieving neither option. It does feel like a bit of a Hodgson's choice at this stage. Thanks.
Thank you. Go on, Tim. Do you want to get next? Sure.
Yeah, on a similar line, I think. I think it's a crude summary, but I think the choice we're being asked to make is between protecting local democracy whilst ensuring that we get the best, that we're fiscally prudent and we get the best value on behalf of residents. Quite a common theme last week when we were discussing it was the danger of local democracy being threatened by this process. And I think that's a justifiable fear. But I don't agree that the adoption of a 4 unitary model will necessarily address this issue. The linkage to residents and local democracy, a linkage between how decisions are made, how problems are solved, how your interests as a resident are best represented, I believe is through good, active, attentive councillors. Certainly the ratio of residents to councillors improves with the 4 model. The likelihood of each councillor being on a committee and therefore directly able to help manage the authority are reduced the larger the number that the current HCC is split into. All proposed models have what's referred to as the 4 pillars of community engagement within their page, and the description of these varies across the different cases. And it's most eloquent, I think, in the 3 model, but it's substantially the same in each of the structure. Local community engagement, structured through local democratic forums where we engage residents, shape services and direct the distribution of grant funding, maintain community assets, consider their transfer to community stewardship where appropriate, and use integrated data to identify and address emerging issues. So a holistic view of how residents could get engaged in local democracy. So I'm not convinced that any one of the models has a monopoly of protecting or delivering local democracy. Just like now, it's done through active councillors understanding the issues faced by their residents, knowing how to access and engage and solicit the appropriate response from the unitary authority in the future. So I don't believe that simply chopping the existing 2-tier system into increasingly small bits necessarily offers any advantage. Having been on the exec of East Herts since 2023, I can speak firsthand of the importance of having sufficient funds available to drive a progressive programme and not having to make critical decisions as to whether to cut services. So, of critical importance to me is the ability of the new unitary authority to be financially sustainable. With funds there, there's an increased opportunity to invest in our community engagement, to empower local communities with local budgets, allowing greater involvement in running assets close to where they're living. And this can only be done with a successful and dependable financial base. The 4 unitary model is the most uncertain of the proposals, given all the vagaries of the numbers that we've seen. And certainly within that model, a central area appears set to fail. It has the highest percentage of deprived areas and the largest percentage of children to be looked after. Overall, the 4 unitary model appears to be the most precarious, and according to the papers, that's even before one of the largest risks, namely disaggregation, is fully understood and costed in. This is a significant risk and could dramatically amend the projections either up or down. Another significant risk that hasn't been modelled, according to the papers, is the cost of maintenance of council-owned properties. Both Stevenage and Welwyn Hatfield have large housing bases and associated ongoing cost risks. Having said that, the paper states that the fair funding review outcome could change the dynamics. If only we knew beforehand, perhaps. That's not going to be available, I think, till Christmas Eve, I think Brian keeps telling us. And that's frustrating that we're again being asked to make a recommendation without perhaps full knowledge. The 2 unitary model potentially represents the least disruptive implementation path by splitting the existing parts county model into 2 parts only and helping to protect the economies of scale and purchasing. Potentially, the 3 model is not a huge further step in complexity, but will necessarily increase the resources needed. However, the 4 unitary model looks very cumbersome and strategic and cross-unitary decisions. The potential weakness in the 2 model is the 3-cornered management arrangement with the heads of each unitary and the mayor being able to govern. My preference would be to have the potential for further votes on this management forum to add checks and balances through different voices and views being heard. And in this respect, the 3 and 4 unitary models improve the likelihood of plurality of political views at the head table. So on balance, I favour the 2 unitary model for its relative ease of implementation and apparent ability to become financially stable very quickly. However, I am nervous about the 3-cornered management team at the head of this structure and the ability for it to be gamed, perhaps. I favour the 3 unitary model on that basis, which will add a further voice and hopefully balance the decision and prioritisation making process. So I'll be voting.
Thanks, Tim. Mine.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I personally am not in favour of this massive reorganisation of local government. I cannot see that it will make any improvement to the delivery of services. In fact, the fragmentation will make deliveries of some of them even more difficult. But the biggest criticism which I have is about the damage which the changes will do to local democracy. People will feel that those who make the decisions are even further away from them than they are at the moment. They will feel that the decision makers are remote. And this will definitely be a big risk in rural areas like East Herts. I'm also very concerned about the future of local councillors. The smaller number which is proposed will all have much heavier workloads, and they will become like full-time professionals. This will reduce the pool of possible future councillors, and this will be a tremendous loss, as we really do need people of all ages. We need the young and the actively employed, as well as the retired. And we also need people from a wide range of backgrounds. So reducing the pool of potential councillors will be very detrimental to local democracy, and I do worry about that. However, the government has asked us to express an opinion and to make a choice. And in the hope that the government will take some notice of what we think, I believe that we should choose, and we should choose the least worst option as we see it. My thoughts are 2 unitaries, councillors would be too remote. 4 unitaries, although councillors would be nearer, delivery of services would be very fragmented and difficult to achieve. 3 unitaries, I believe to be the least worst, and this is the one which I will vote for. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Carl.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to start by thanking all the members who contributed to the debate last week. It's a really interesting debate, and it's helped me gather my thoughts. I just want to go through the different options. I think the first option is the two unitary option, which only got 2 votes last week. So it's obviously not popular. I think the main perceived advantage of this is size. But I've been doing a little bit more research since the meeting last week, and there's an interesting example in Cumbria, where Cumbria devolved into 2 unitaries, so Cumberland Council and Westmoreland Furness Council. And it's all a bit anecdotal because it's kind of reading stuff on the internet about how they've done since those unitaries were formed in 2023. And what I can gather is that Cumberland Council has struggled to achieve the savings that were forecast. But Westmoreland and Furness appears to have done very well and has achieved a lot of savings. And the interesting thing about that example is that Cumberland is the larger of the 2. I think Cumberland Council has something like 275,000 population, and Westmoreland and Furness is 225,000 population. So it kind of sealed in my mind that actually size is not the key issue here, and actually small can be beautiful. And so I think but based on that, I think given that size is the only perceived advantage of the 2 unitary option, that kind of discounted that. So regarding the 4 unitary option, I'd actually be quite comfortable with 4 unitaries in a lot of circumstances, but I have concerns about what's been proposed. I think my big concern is about the boundary changes, and I think that concerns me for 2 reasons. I think firstly, because I think it makes it less likely to be accepted by government as a viable option. I think by having to put in the extra proposal about the boundary changes, that lessens the chance of success of that option. I think the second reason is to do with the costs of what we can say aggregation and disaggregation. And in my thoughts about that, I was hoping to pick more up from the meeting last week, but I didn't get too much about the cost of disaggregation of county-council services. But it strikes me that potentially is less of an issue than the cost of aggregation, because as district councils, we're always looking for opportunities to have shared services. And actually, if something works at a county level, why could all the various unitaries not have a shared service? And then you don't need to worry about disaggregation. You just have shared services across the unitaries for things that particularly work well at county level. So regarding the cost of aggregation, it's different because with disaggregation, you've got no starting point that leads your decision. It just gets disaggregated in whatever way it's going to be disaggregated and what you've got. With aggregation, you've got a starting point. So, for example, in this 4 unitary option that we've got here, we've got East Herts, we've got Broxbourne, we've got some of North Herts and some of Welling Hatfield. And all those four areas have got to be aggregated. And I feel that makes it more complex than it need be. And actually, I'd probably be more comfortable if it was just East Herts and Broxbourne, because aggregating 2 sets of services it'll be far easier than aggregating 4 sets of services across 4 different counties. In my previous life, one of the hardest things I ever did was upgrade the database from one system to a different system. And with councils, there's going to be all this kind of thing going on where different services are going to have to merge their data. And that is a tremendously complex task that takes a lot of time and effort. And I just feel that doing that across 4 different council areas is just going to be very difficult, particularly as the two extra bits that we get in North Herts and in Welling Hatfield don't add that much in terms of population. So that's the reason why I'm concerned that not only is this the weakest option in terms of acceptance by the government, but it also brings in the most complexity in terms of aggregating the data. And the other thing with it as well is the corporate knowledge outcome. Obviously, I expect that a lot of the employees of the unitary councils will be former employees of councils. If you're bringing into this area parts of Welling Hatfield and parts of North Herts, they're not going to come with that corporate knowledge in the same way as it would if it was just East Herts, say, Broxbourne. That's just a thought I have. So that kind of led me to the 3 option, where I think we obviously don't have the complex boundary issues. The boundaries are straight for councils in sort of Stevenage, North Herts, East Herts, Broxbourne. So hopefully you can hold on to that corporate knowledge in those 4 areas. It also means that the shared services that we currently have in waste collection, in IT, in Revs and Bens, thought of another earlier, I've forgotten again now, but there's various shared services, and in the 3 unitary, they can all continue, possibly with an addition. Whereas if we were in the 4 unitary, all those shared services could potentially be lost or have to go through complex changes. There have obviously been a number of successful local government organisations recently, but those that have not been successful have gone wrong in the first 2 or 3 years, and basically largely due to finance. If the costs are higher than you expect them to be, that's going to happen quickly. And if you to get out of that situation, you obviously need to get good savings quickly as well. With a position in Hertfordshire, my understanding from the gentleman sat behind me is that the county council is not particularly wealthy, and so it kind of means that if there are difficulties, we don't necessarily have the resources to get ourselves out of them easily. I think if this was done at a different point in time, when council finances were better funded, it would be an easier job to go to take more of a risk. I think at this moment in time, when all the councils are in financial difficulties to some degree, I just think it's a huge risk to go for a complex option. I kind of feel that the 3 unitary option is the one that carries the least complexity about it, and in that sense, I think it's possibly the one that I feel is the safest financially, least likely to lead us into trouble in those first 3 years. And I don't believe that going to the two would be any better than that. So I've kind of settled on 3, and I do wish I could have settled on 4, but I think the option presented to us was probably not the one I could vote.
Thanks very much, Carl. Chris, go for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We've had a lot of interesting speeches and sentiments tonight and in the full council meeting, and indeed in the conversations I had with residents over the last few months, I guess it must have been, and a lot of it is quite negative, and I don't disagree with that in the sense that there are many reasons which I've gone through before as to why I don't think this is the best thing to be happening. But this isn't the first time we've been presented by any means with a choice that we don't really want to make, and we have to make the least worst option. I think that's the thing we have to concentrate on, as we have done as an executive, I think, since 2023, a lot of the time, just realising things aren't how we wish they were, but doing the best we can with the available choices. So I think that's the important thing to think about. I also think, similar to what Carl was saying, actually, that it's how we do it is the most important thing, rather than the boundaries themselves. In that Carl mentioned about shared services for currently county-wide services. But the other thing we could do is we could also, I say we, in the future it could be done that district level services could still be done locally by having local departments within the larger unitaries. So we don't have to lose the locality that's needed, the level of locality that's needed for those services. And that's sort of beyond what we're discussing today, but it means that it's perhaps less important than we realise. It's more important how we do this when it happens, or how it's done. The we is definitely wrong, so I won't be around. Financially, 3 unitaries looks better than 4 unitaries, and 2 unitaries looks better than 3 unitaries, according to the figures we've got. But what is also important for me is that, as a Bishop Stortford resident of many years, I've often felt that we have been neglected, not because of any bias from anybody, but because of where we are on the periphery. And it's easier to deliver projects in the centre, as I've said before, in the centre of a county where there's lots of towns that will benefit from it. And the further that unitary goes away, the centre of that unitary goes away from Bishop Stortford, the worse it is. Also, that would apply to Sawbridgeworth. So that for me rules out the 2 unitary, as long as there's another viable option. The only issue I've got with 3 unitaries, I think, at the moment, or not the only issue, but the issue that stands out a little bit for me is that it does involve being with Stevenage. Nothing against Stevenage, except that it is the most deprived area. So that means we've got a lot of, we know exactly where the money from county tends to go. And it's the biggest council, and of course, the biggest budget, and the most of that budget goes on deprived area. So we'd be with Stevenage, which would be difficult for us to saddle, I guess. But the 4 unitary, as has been touched on by other people, I don't think we really know what we're voting for. We vote for 4 because we're not sure if the boundaries will be accepted or not. With the boundary changes, it looks more viable, but without them, it looks very difficult to manage financially. So I don't think it's a realistic option, much as I understand Councillor Glover Ward's points about A, we don't really know what's going to happen financially, and B, the democratic side. The democratic side, however, when you take into account that lots of people in this committee didn't vote, if everyone had voted, it might have actually made up that difference of 5, depending on how many people vote for 3 today. So it's not clear democratically which option people wanted as an entire council, as far as the figures are concerned. I also think, finally, just to make it clear to anyone who might be listening or interested, that I think it's fair to say for all of us that we're not voting on the basis of what's good for a political party or for our political party. A, because that's not right, because residents will be stuck with this for probably decades. And it's about residents, not about parties. But also, 2 things. How unpredictable politics is now is quite unprecedented. So how would anyone know anyway which party would be in charge of which unitary, how people would vote in future? And the other thing is, if you end up in charge of a council that's not very viable, it's not actually good for you politically anyway. Some of us are no to our cost. So yeah, on balance, the least worst option would be 3 unitaries for me.
Thanks, Chris. Joe.
Thank you, Leader. I said to you very flippantly when this idea was first put to us that our response should be a letter returned with 2 words saying no thanks. And that should be our response. And I was flippant at the time, but the more you think about it, that seems like quite a considered position. I'm finding it very difficult to know exactly which option is the best. And I think that we haven't got the information to know exactly which option is the best. So it doesn't really feel like Alton's choice. It almost feels like a Russian roulette to me. You know, we're going to pull the trigger and not really know what's in the barrel in the future. I've said it quite a few times before, you know, like, why are we here? Are we here just to deliver basic services, or are we here to shape our communities? And I just feel that it's called devolution. It's almost like gaslighting us. It doesn't feel like devolution at all. It feels like completely opposite. The democracy is going to move further away. I quite liked it when Councillor Cox said in the chamber, said there is another choice, 1 unitary with much stronger towns and parishes. Perhaps you could argue 1 unitary or one big council with 10 districts. Maybe that would be a way forward. So yeah, in terms of answering the question, listening to the arguments and having to make a decision, 3 will be what I'll be saying tonight. I think it was interesting. I think it was excellent that we had that debate in the chamber. I'm really glad that we, I think it was you, put forward the motion to have the debate in the chamber. I think that I'm so pleased that happened. And if you look at the diverse views, well, everyone was united in one view. I don't think anyone said this is a really, really good idea, this is thought out and this is going to be best for our communities. I don't remember anyone saying that. But there was lots of different perspectives put forward. It was very diverse, but we couldn't agree. And I was actually going to say the same as you, Chris, that you have to discount that some of us voted because we wanted to listen to the arguments on the night and take it away. So who knows what happened? I would have probably said 3 on that evening as well. So yeah, to sum up, I feel like I'm being forced to make a choice without all the full facts. I'm really worried about the future and the finances. I mean, if you look at the state of the whole country, why now, with the financial situation we're in, with 75p in every pound is going towards paying off existing debt, are we going to add huge cost to reorganise local government? And it will be as well. These things always spiral out of control. I mean, just the IT side of it alone, which comes in my portfolio, when I'm briefed on that, I just think, this is a nightmare. It's going to be so much work. It's going to cost so much money. You know, there is going to be situations where we can't deliver services because things haven't been implemented through no fault of anyone. Just the complexity of doing it are just going to cause problems. It's just we don't need to be doing this. We do, I think, need to be reforming local government, and I think we do need some real devolution where some decisions are made locally in terms of planning, particularly in terms of raising revenue. How can we operate, or how can we provide services when we are only operating on grants? And again, it's more gaslight. Was it fair funding? Is that what they call it? It's just gaslight. It's not fair funding. Fair funding would be us having a deal with our voters at the ballot, setting out our manifestos and saying this is what we're going to do with council tax and business rates, etc. And then people can vote for us if they want to or not, and then we can properly shape our community. I don't think this is where LGR is going. I don't think anyone knows where LGR is going. It was 3 for me this time.
Thanks, Joe. So, I mean, some really, really detailed arguments and clearly really well thought out. We've obviously spent a lot of time in the last few weeks really thinking this through. So thank you all very much. Bob, I just wanted to offer you, obviously the group leader here from the Conservative group, if you've got anything to add.
Thank you very much, Ben. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you. Well, I'm going to just share one or two comments, but before I do that, I absolutely acknowledge we've been through the legal advice that it is for this executive group to make the decision as to what goes forward to central government. So in what I say now, I'm not particularly trying to influence the views of executive members, but I'll do my best not to depart from a central line. I think the first thing that I would say, certainly on behalf of the Conservative group, and I think this sentiment is echoed right through every member in the entire council, we are strongly against the entirety of this proposed local government reorganisation. And just to make it clear, we are also against the mooted imposition of a mayor on top of whatever is the reorganised shape of local government. I appreciate the idea is that the mayor will be elected, but as one or two members of the executive said this evening, the potential arrival of a mayor seems to us in the Conservative group to be the exact opposite of devolution. And it's just withdrawing democracy further and further away from people and drawing it into a smaller and smaller group of people who have any form of authority or power. So we are strongly against the entirety of the mooted reorganisation and the possibility of a mayor. I believe you may have prepared some words to that effect, Ben. And if you have, I can tell you now that I will agree with those words on behalf of the Conservatives, and we will align ourselves absolutely to the words that you prepared. Beyond that, acknowledging that the decision as to what goes into central government rests with the executive here this evening. All I will say, given that obviously we've heard, I think every member of the executive, apart from one, say that their preference is a 3 unitary option. I just think I'm doing my duty just to remind the viewing public that at the extraordinary council meeting just last week, the majority vote was in favour of 4 unitaries, and I think we all knew it's fine that that's an indicative vote. I'm not suggesting that this group of people is bound by that vote, but never mind. It was a clear outcome, and as things presently stand, it looks like the executive here this evening is not going to follow the indication provided at full council just last week. So I think that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thanks, Bob. Okay, so it's down to me to keep you hearing more and more about LGR when I know. In fact, I just want to start by thanking you, Helen, Brian, and the rest of the team for the many hundreds of hours that you've put in to get us to this point. I know it's not over yet, but I think it's really important that we will recognise the huge effort that's gone in from all the officers into creating the 3 documents and the spine document and all of that background. So thank you very much, I think, on behalf of all of us here. That's really appreciated, and I will try not to be quick. I'm trying not to be too slow to extend the pain. yes, sorry about that. Yeah, I just wanted to start, I think, by well, actually, I'll begin firstly, but I think by just responding to Bob. Thanks very much, Bob. I take your point. I think the correction on perhaps on what what you said was that there was a clear majority in favour of a unitary, but there were 14, I think, who voted to abstain, and many of whom are in this room tonight at that meeting. And so I think the overall result was rather less clear. But what was clear, I think we all agree, was that no one wants this. I think that's the important. I just really want to focus on one part of the issues. The discussion tonight has been fantastic, and I'm really, really indebted to you for all that thought that you've put in to this project, into this process. I think I just wanted to kind of finish off by talking about really the choice that we see as for a unitary really being framed around a choice between financial sustainability and on one hand and sort of local representation on the other. And I went through all the kind of the financial, my view on the financial issues at the meeting on the 2 and the 4. I just wanted to focus in very specifically tonight on one of those issues that really it's really the local representation, the democratic representation, and the claim that the 4 unitary in particular represents better democratic representation. I think people have touched on it, but I don't think that is the case. When you look at the details, the ratio, of electors to councillors and number of councillors, just because of the way things have been organised in the papers. So in the 4 unitary case, there was a strange fudge to try to make it the best democratic representation. The final number of the councillors that we see for the 4 unitary is based around wards. So in the 2 and the 3, it's based around 3 councillors per division. The 4 unitary model is different. It was based, as I say, around wards, where a current 3 councillor ward would only get 2 councillors, so they'd lose a councillor, and the 2 councillor wards just get 1 councillor, and then 1 councillor wards, mainly the rural ones, would stay the same. So in the 4 model, this leads to an average representation in our unitary of about 3,500 electors per councillor. But that hides a huge variation in that electoral representation across our district, across our unitary, from wards with 54% below that average to wards with 59% more above that average. So a huge variation. 31 wards across our unitary would have more than a 10% variation on the average, with 16 wards, more than 30% variation from the average. And that's huge. I don't know if you remember the electoral review process that we went through back in 22, and 10% is the maximum. 10% is seen as a problem. So beyond 10, so we're looking at 31 wards, more than a 10% variation. So hugely unrepresentative. Then there was a proposed manual adjustment to the worst wards, and that helped a little bit. But even then, with that manual adjustment, we still ended up with more than 38 wards with a greater than 10% variation. So a 4 unitary would give us a deeply undemocratic model in terms of the sheer variation from elector and councillor numbers. So we'd go from some wards with 1,500 electors per councillor, others with 4,000 electors per councillor. So some more than twice as many as others. That's a statistical view to take. It's a statistical way of looking at it. And of course, there could be a boundary review subsequently. But I think we've got to remember that there are 21 county areas up for LGR. Each of those could have 2, 3, 4 unitaries. So, and I think when I last looked, the boundary review team was about 6 or maybe 20. So, this is not going to happen quickly if we went down the 4. And lastly, I just want to finish by looking at how a 4 unitary would look from the resident's point of view, what that would mean. So if we take someone living in a 3 councillor ward, like Kingsmead or in Hertford, or like one of the wards in Bishop Stortford. So currently, that person has 4 councillors, 3 district councillors and 1 county councillor. In a 4 unitary model, they would have just 2 councillors. So their representation in terms of councillors will be halved. Look at someone in a single ward. So Hunsdon, any of those single wards, currently they have 2 councillors, 1 district and 1 county. In the 4 unitary model, they would have just 1. Again, representation is halved. Now, what happens when that 1 councillor is away, busy, or ill, or just not particularly good? I think it's a significant challenge. And if we look at the 3 unitary model, in Kingsmead, residents would have 3 councillors. So if we look at the 3 unitary model, what happens? How does that work? Well, in Kingsmead, residents would have 3 councillors, not 2, as for the 4 model. In Hunsdon, residents would have 3 councillors, not 1, as the 4 unitary. So I think we need to be very careful in assuming, and I think others have touched on this, in assuming that 4 unitary actually leads to better democratic representation, because it's fewer councillors, which makes it more challenging for residents. So I will stop there. I think my position remains the same. I still believe the 3 is the least bad option. But I think I just wanted to recognise that, obviously, as I said to Bob, we all know, and we all saw last week, that there was a general feeling of real upset that this process was being forced on us. And so I wanted to propose an amendment so that this report includes an additional recommendation. I can read this out. I'll read out the recommendation, the amendment that I propose. Following the extraordinary full council meeting on the 13th of November, during which councillors from all parties expressed anger and frustration with the local government reorganisation process, the executive resolves that the leader writes to the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government at MHCLG. The letter will set out our strong objection to the changes being imposed on our district, the manner in which they are being implemented, and the threat they pose to local democratic representation for our residents. So I'm happy to propose that. I have a seconder.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm happy to second this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone want to comment? Joe?
Leader, I did want to come back to leader of the Conservative group. He's listening. I did want to come back to Bob on his comments. I do take it. I do understand what you're saying about the indicative vote and what council decided. I do think you need to take into account the huge number of abstentions as well. I wouldn't say it was a clear voice, but how I approached that meeting was to listen to the argument, listen to what different members had to say, and then form my own view rather than just go with what the council's saying. And that's how I approached it. I wanted to understand the arguments and then go with what I thought was the best argument, which I think 3 is the least of the worst options.
Thanks, Joe. Bob, did you want to comment?
Yes, thank you very much. Just to say formally, given that you've now read the wording out to the meeting, on behalf of the Conservative group, we absolutely align ourselves to that wording. It would be fair to say that if we'd had a little bit more notice, we might have possibly tweaked the wording a bit, but we haven't, and we will absolutely align ourselves with the wording. And I might just really quick to say that I think the key for us, the key thing is what is best for residents. You may have spotted at the extraordinary meeting that our group was not of a unanimous position. Some of our members abstained because they just dislike the whole thing so much they can't see that there is anything that's worth moving forward. Otherwise, our group voted in favour of 4. And primarily, I think, if you distill it down, that's because we think that is the best approach for our residents, and that is not least because we think that will reduce the likelihood that council tax for our residents will go up. But just to say, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Bob. So does anyone have any comment on the amendment to the proposal? Shall we go and vote on it? Okay, Alex.
I'm not asking for an amendment to the proposal, but what I think is really important is that when it goes forward, that we're going to be putting with these other aligned with other places like Broxbourne and Stevenage. They don't have town and parish councils, and that, you know, with the extent of town and parish councils in East Herts district is unique, and I think that unique characteristic needs to be stressed, and that because I'm concerned that there'll be some kind of collapse into one form of model, and I know how hard it is. I'm aware of how hard it's been for these boroughs to establish that. Some of them have gone out to residents to try and establish town and parish councils because this is coming along, and residents haven't accepted it. So I'd be really sad. It would be really sad for East Herts residents if we lost that democratic representation through some kind of collapse into one size fits all approach.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, should we vote on the amendment, the proposed amendment? So it's been proposed and seconded. Could we have all of those in favour, please? Thank you very much. Anyone against or abstaining? No, that's carried. Thank you very much. So now we will go for a vote on the amended proposal, the paper. So we've had it proposed and seconded. Oh, no, we need to propose it and second, don't we? We have it. We did. That's right. Okay, so we're going to vote on the amended. That's right. We're going to vote. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by voting on recommendation 1. That's as the paper, and take the 3 options in succession. When I call out the option, all of those in favour put their hand up to vote, and they can be tallied. We're not going to do an individual vote because there's only a relatively small number of us. So we're going to vote as option 1. Those on the three options for we're going to vote for recommendation 1, which is the 3 options. So if you can vote, start by voting for option A, which is the 2 unitaries. So all in favour of option A for the 2 unitary, please. Okay, that's clear. Thank you very much. All those in favour of option B, the 3 unitaries. Okay, thank you. And all those in favour of option C, the 4 unitary. Good. Okay, thank you very much. That's great. And yes, so option B is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll come now to option 2. So that the executive resolves that the leader writes to the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government at MHCOG, as I read out. So could we have a show of hands, all those in favour of that, please? Thank you very much. Anyone against or abstaining? No, that's carried. Thank you very much. Great. Okay, that's LGR over then. Okay. We'll move on to item 6, which is the Council Tax Support Scheme 2026-27, which is on pages 480 to 486 of the report pack. And I'm going to hand over to Councillor Carr-Britton for the report.
Thank you, Leader. Council tax support schemes are devised by individual local authorities. Schemes are valid for 1 year and must be approved by council before the 11th of March, immediately preceding the financial year in which it is to take effect. The earlier proposal to change to a banded scheme, which would reduce the administration costs of the council tax support scheme, has been worked on during the year. However, due to the complexity of the proposed changes, significant work was required to ensure the scheme would remain broadly cost neutral compared to the current model, whilst also ensuring that individuals would not be materially worse off. As a result, there was insufficient time to finalise and consult on the scheme ahead of its inclusion in the tax base for 26-27. Therefore, the council tax support scheme will remain unchanged for 26-27. Work on the banded scheme will continue with a view to consulting early in the new financial year. Neither the county nor police have raised any objection to the proposals for 26-27. So the proposal is to recommend to council that there be no change to the local council tax support scheme for 26-27 in the proposed report.
Thank you very much, Carl. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Alex. Any comments, questions, or thoughts? It seems it's a pity, but I think we've obviously got to do what's right, and hopefully we can come back and come back to it later, and it will still work, but it's obviously got to be done correctly. So it seems a sensible decision. Thank you. Okay, so could we have a show of hands to make the recommendation to the executive? All those. Oh, sorry, not going to council. Yeah, can we have a show of hands, please? All those in favour. Thank you very much. Anyone against? Abstentions? No, that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on to item 7. Playing pitch and outdoor sports strategy, pages 487 to 874. And I'll hand over to Councillor Vicky Clifford Ward, who's going to present the report.
Thank you. This council has agreed to update the district plan with a view to commence formal work in 2026. To support this process, a large quantity of underpinning evidence is required to support the strategy that the council will ultimately choose to propose going forward. The playing pitch and outdoor sports strategy is part of this evidence base, updating a previous 2017 study. The updated evidence base provides a robust assessment of the supply and demand for outdoor sports facilities across East Herts and sets out a framework for protecting, enhancing and providing new facilities to meet community needs up to 2043. It has been developed collaboratively and in accordance with Sports England guidance. Some key points to note are that the strategy identifies some shortfalls in grass pitches for football, rugby and cricket, with quality issues being a major factor in participation. There is a need for additional 3G pitches and a new full-size hockey pitch, alongside provision for emerging sports such as paddle. Demand for non-pitch sports is broadly being met, but some clubs are operating at or above capacity. Document includes a site-by-site action plan, providing an overarching framework to prioritise improvement and guide investment, including through developer contributions. Importantly, future demand analysis does not account for housing growth. As the new district plan emerges and the scale and location of new development is determined, planning officers will use Sport England's calculators to identify the demand and pitch requirements of housing growth scenarios. We are mindful of the environmental sustainability issues associated with rubber crumb 3G pitches, but equally recognise their significant value for health, well-being and participation. We are following Sports England current advice, but welcome the work they are currently undertaking to address this issue, as set out in the position statement on their website, including enhancing pitch standards to contain microplastics and testing alternative 3G services. When considering future planning policy and planning application decisions, officers will balance the benefits of new artificial pitches against any environmental impacts and proposed mitigation, taking account of the latest Sports England guidance and research. In summary, the playing pitch and outdoor sports strategy is a key evidence document to help safeguard and improve outdoor sports provision, supporting health, well-being and community cohesion across East Herts. Therefore, the report recommends that the study is agreed as part of the new district plan evidence base and as a material consideration in the determination of planning applications. To ensure the strategy remains current and responsive, the report also recommends that future updates to the action plan are delegated to the Director of Place in consultation with the Executive Member for Planning and Growth. So I'd like to propose that this paper goes forwards from Executive recommended to Council.
Thank you very much. Can we have a seconder, please? Joe, thank you very much. Okay, comments, questions? Yeah, I'll start with Chris. That's all right.
Yeah, it's more of a personal bugbear really, that 20 years in the making of having been a very keen runner at that point and still trying to run, but nowhere near the same pace. Disappointed at the lack of facilities in Bishop Stortford and nearby in terms of track facilities for athletes and budding athletes. Although I can't say I'm going to become the next Steve Cram as I hoped. Someone else may be able to be in Stortford if they had a track to run on. I'm not sure how this was developed, this report, but I think if I understand it, it was just from going to existing clubs. There's a trick being missed there because there is no existing athletics club in Bishop Stortford or nearby, so you can't ask that club if there's a facility or not needed for members of that club, as the club doesn't exist. And there may be a demand out there that's not been looked at. So I don't know if there's a remedy to this. I'm not suggesting we change this. I'll certainly be voting for it, but I just wanted to make that comment.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I take your point, and I suppose the evidence base follows sort of Sport England's guidance. So yes, it does sort of focus on existing clubs, but it also takes account the sort of the governing body. So the sort of athletics governing body was on the steering group, and Sport England, which have the sort of wider framework. And I don't think it precludes that sort of coming forward as an option. And I think that's one of the benefits of the action plan, really, because if there are issues that you know, that come up and there's things that we need to address, I think that can come forward as part of that review. So to sort of support that action plan updates, we're going to meet with the steering group, which will include English athletics. So I think that there is the ongoing dialogue that, you know, isn't precluded from the existing evidence base, essentially.
Thank you.
Marnie, do you want to come back?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, well, I welcome this report. I think it's amazing to see how many facilities we have across the whole district. It's really encouraging, lovely. I have one little worry, which Councillor Glover did touch upon, and this is the 3G pitches and their characteristics. And I understand that Sports England is supporting them at the moment, but I'm glad to hear they're doing some research, because there are environmental impacts on the crumb patches and the microplastic particles which leach out from them. So I do hope they will continue good research on that and maybe come up with a solution which is more environmentally friendly. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, just briefly to say, welcome this, and I think it highlights the opinion, I think, of the all exec, the importance we place on sports and exercise and well-being, and at the grassroots level, being able to provide facilities is so important for the young generations and people not so young as well. You know, we're an area that's got, we've produced at Hertford Rugby Club Jamie George playing for England. We've had Oliver Skipp, who went to Richard Hale, went on to play for Tottenham and now another club. And so having these facilities really does make a difference at that level, but also at the grassroots level as well. People doing it just for fun. So I really welcome this. And I hope that at some stage this council will resolve to open the velodrome in Hearts, or whatever we end up being.
That's one for the unitary probably, but yeah, that's good. Yeah, thanks very much. It is a really interesting report. I mean, they're all really interesting, but it was really, really great to get that full kind of pattern of sports facility and supply across the district. So yeah, that's great. Okay, if there are any more comments or questions, okay, should we take a vote? All those in favour? Thank you very much. Anyone against or abstaining? No, that's carried. Thank you. Great. Okay, we're moving on to item 8, which is the disposal of council-owned land surplus to requirements. And that's on pages 875 to 884 of the report back. And that's back to Councillor Carr-Britton.
Thank you, Leader. This report contains details of 2 land assets which could be disposed of by the council as they are surplus to requirements. First item is land at Harlow Mill, which was acquired from Sawbridge Urban District Council many years ago. The site contains a large number of trees and is overgrown and inaccessible. The site has limited access from Harlow Road. Interest in acquisition may come from adjoining owners and farmers who may wish to increase their land holdings for agricultural purposes. A sale or reduction in the ownership of this land would save the council from the liability of ongoing inspections and tree surveys. The site map and estimated value of the land is included within the Exhibit Appendix A. The second piece of land is in Hertford, which is subject to 2 long leasehold interests at very low returns to the council. Both leaseholds were granted in the late 1960s. 2 buildings on the land are now at the end of their useful lives. The tenants would like to work in partnership with East Herts to sell the site for best consideration. Council officers have negotiated an approach to this disposal that would see the splitting of the purchase price between the two leaseholds and the council on terms acceptable to the council. Given the unusual nature of this disposal, that is, the council will be acting in partnership with two leaseholds, and thus the inherent greater complexity when compared with other disposals, the recommendation in this report is that confirmation of the actual disposal be delegated to the executive member of finance, acting in consultation with the director of communities. A reduction in the ownership of this land would save the council from the liability of ongoing road and street lighting maintenance, as the access road to these sites are not public highway and are maintained at East Hart's expense, but would be within the area it is proposed to dispose of. Again, the site map and estimated value of the land is included within the exhibit appendix, along with the details of the existing tenancies. The recommendations are on page 875, and I'd like to propose this report.
Thank you, Carl. Could I have a seconder, please? Chris, thank you. Thank you very much. Obviously, there's a part 2 here. In light of that, has anyone got any comments or questions that outside part 2? No. Okay. Sounds like you got off lightly, Carl. Yeah, I mean, clearly, I think it's really important that we don't sit on assets that are of absolutely no benefit, or where there's an agreement from tenants that actually there's a long-term benefit to selling. So I think this makes great sense, and I think it's important to thank the teams involved in working through this, because obviously it takes a lot of time and effort to prepare these sites. So yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so if there are no questions, we'll go for a vote. All those in favour, please. Thank you very much. Anyone against or abstaining? No. Okay, thank you. That's carried. Right, last item, urgent business. Is there any urgent business? There is none. Okay, so at 2012, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.